Greetings, mathematicians. In this video, we're going to continue our work with equations, and this time we're going to be working in reverse. So instead of starting with words and writing symbols, this time we're going to be starting with symbols and translating this into words. Now, one thing to be a little bit careful about here, as you saw in your warm-up from the other day, that there were lots of words, for example, multiplication. You could say multiply or find the product of. And that means that when you go to compare your answers with someone else, you might have a slightly different solution, and that's fine. So let's have a look here and see what we come up with. So for this one, our symbols are 3x minus 2, and we want to change that into words. So one possible solution for this is 3 times a number decreased by 2. But there are also other options. Maybe you would say the product of 3 and a number decreased by 2. Or 2 less than 3 times a number. So many options here, but that's just a couple. Here's another one. We have x over 2 plus 5 equals 10. One possible option, half a number added to 5 is 10. Again, you might say something like half a number increased by 5 is 10. So possibly you could have had other options here. Keep that in mind as you do your work. Next up, let's have you pause the video and give these problems a try, translating them into words, and then come back when you're ready to check your work. All right, here are some possible answers, just like in the problems we did a moment ago. Remember that this is not the only possible answer. A couple things I want to point out to you. The problem with the parentheses. When you see parentheses, a couple of ways that you can accomplish that. One thing you'll see is you'll sometimes see 2 operations in a row without numbers in between. So you've got 2 times the sum. So you've got multiplication and addition back to back without a number. So you don't have a 2 or a 3 or a number. You've just got multiplication and the sum, addition, right next to each other. That's a way that you know that you're talking about having parentheses there. Another way you might know that you need parentheses is to use the word quantity. 2 times the quantity. Whenever you see that, that's another way to indicate that you're going to need parentheses. And for the last one, make sure that you've said it's a different number. So since you started with an x and then you switched over to a y, make sure you're saying that it's a different number, so it's another number. All right, next up we have several algebraic properties. And these are the properties that allow us to solve equations. So you have been solving equations for quite some time, but these are the things that allow us to do that. So here we have the additive inverse. This is what allows me to, we sometimes get a little sloppy and we say this cancels. So for example, you might subtract 3 from both sides and we say it cancels. Really it doesn't cancel. Really what we're doing is we're using the additive inverse. That's what happens when you add 3 plus negative 3 and you get a 0. Same thing with multiplicative inverse. When you multiply both sides by an inverse, sometimes we get it a little sloppy and we say it cancels. Really what we mean is that it multiplies to 1. Then we have the commutative and associative properties. And these are true for both addition and multiplication. So this is your commutative property for addition. It says that you can add things in any order and you're going to get the same answer. So for example, 2 plus 3 is 5 and 3 plus 2 is also 5. Whereas this one here is your commutative property of multiplication. And it says the same thing. You can multiply in any order you want. So 2 times 3 is 6 and 3 times 2 is also 6. Same thing for the associative property. It is true for addition, and it is also true for multiplication. And what changes here is not the order. You notice that the order stays the same. It says A, B, C, A, B, C, A, B, C, A, B, C. But what changes is the grouping. Here you've got the first two terms grouped. Here you've got the second two terms grouped. Same thing here. First two terms grouped, second two terms grouped. So this is talking about regrouping things. A lot of times you'll use this in mental math if you're trying to add a whole bunch of numbers. Kind of a tip or trick is to try to group things into things that add up to 10 because it's easy to add tens. If you've ever done that, then you've been using the associative property of addition. Next we have our identity properties. Again, they have one for addition and one for multiplication. And we use these a lot of time when we're simplifying. So when you add 0 to something, you get the same thing back. 3 plus 0 is 3, 5 plus 0 is 5. And when you multiply something by 1, you get the same thing back. 1 times 5 is 5, 1 times 3 is 3. And then we have the distributive property. Remember, this is the one where you have addition, or it could also be subtraction inside of the parentheses. And then you are multiplying through something in front of, or technically it could also be behind. So you could distribute from behind. And that is your distributive property. And so far all of those properties were used for simplifying. And then next up we have our properties that we use for solving. So these are the things that we do to both sides of an equation to keep an equation balanced, but then to start isolating a variable. So for example, we can add the same thing on both sides of an equation and keep the equation balanced. We can subtract the same thing on both sides of an equation and keep the equation balanced. We can multiply the same number on both sides of an equation, and we can divide both sides of an equation by the same number. The only thing you have to be careful about with the division one is you can't divide by 0. Remember, division by 0 is undefined. And we're going to go ahead and stop here for now, and we'll move on in the next video for word problems. Bye for now.